This is the classification of organism notes that you're going to need to fill in. Why are we going to classify things? Because it makes it easier to study life. There's so many different things out there, and by using taxonomy, which is the assigning of a universally accepted name to a species, this is a way that scientists can make it easier to classify. Another vocab word that you need to know is binomial nomenclature. This is the classification that they came up with, which includes the genus and the species names. The genus is always capitalized and it's always the first one. And the species name is always lowercase, it's never capitalized, and it's going to be the second name. An example would be Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus, sapiens is the species, and that's a human. Otocoilus virginianus, that is the white-tailed deer. Otocoilus is the genus, and virginianus is the species. Every single living organism has a binomial nomenclature name that they came up with. Linnaeus, there's this guy that was, his name was Carl Linnaeus, and he came up with the system that we're using today. He was alive back in the 1700s, and he was a botanist who is a person that studies plants, and he created the classification system based on physical similarities. So what he did was he actually looked at the organism and put them into different categories. Now, originally, he only had two choices. They were either plants or animals. So if someone brought him an organism, they would say, "Hey, Linnaeus, what is this?" And his only two choices were either it was a plant or an animal. Obviously, things have changed a bit since the 1700s. So in the Linnaean system, we have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. You need to know these in order. And one way to learn this in order is to make up a little phrase. And you can change it up any way you want to, but the one I use is King Philip came over for greasy spaghetti. So K in king would be kingdom. The P for Philip would be phylum. Came would be class. Over would be order. For would be family. Greasy would be genus. And spaghetti would be the species. If you want to come up with another one, then that's great. You know, make it yours. But you have to know these in order. So the biggest one is the kingdom. This is going to include the most different organisms. Then we have the phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And you'll notice that the letters on there got smaller. As we go down towards species, we get less and less and less organisms. They're going to be a lot more specific. And I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. So Linnaeus, back in the 1700s, his system had two kingdoms. They were based on physical similarities, and the only way that he could figure out if it was in one kingdom or the other was just observing and having a knowledge of the organisms. The modern classification system, which we use today, has either 5 or 6 kingdoms, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. It's based on the physical similarities, and now we can throw in some genetics. So we can actually do genetic testing on some of these organisms and classify them that way. And it uses observation, knowledge of organisms, molecular clocks, and other genetic techniques that we've come along with the technology. So let's talk about the modern classification system. Remember, Linnaeus was only plant and animals. And of course, as time went by, there were certain organisms that maybe didn't fit into that group, either plant or animal. So what they did was they put all of the different organisms into separate things. And the old system had 5. So we had animals, we had plants, we have protists. Protists are going to be, we're going to talk a little bit more about them. They kind of don't fit with the other groups. Fungi, and then the last one is called Monera. all the prokaryotic species were dumped into the Monera group. Remember, prokaryotic means that it doesn't have a nucleus, it's a single cell. Most of the time, it's going to be bacteria. Okay, so the 5 system is animal, plants, protists, fungi, and Monera. But as we went along, we realized that maybe things didn't fit as well. So it keeps the animal, the plant, the fungi, and the protista kingdoms. But what it did was it took Monera and it split it into 2 different kingdoms. The first one is called Eubacteria, and this is normal everyday prokaryotes found on Earth. For example, it's going to be your normal bacteria that you get, like the strep bacteria or the staph bacteria or things like that we're going to have contact with. These are just normal everyday bacteria kind of things. Then we have something that's called archaebacteria. And these prokaryotes are, I call them like the Chuck Norris of bacteria. And what happens is they can live in places that are really harsh conditions, like a really salty lake. It can live in extreme temperatures, like a thermal vent in the ocean or things like that. And sometimes they're also called extremophiles. And what that just means is that they love extreme environments and that sort of thing. So instead of the 5 systems with Monera, they've split the Monera into 2, and now we have 6. All right, so we have 3 domains for these 6 kingdoms. The domains are the big things. The first one is called Eukarya, and that includes the animals kingdom, the plant kingdom, the fungi, and the protista. Okay, so all of those are eukarya. Guess what? They're also eukaryotic, which means that eukaryotes have a nucleus and they are multicellular. The next one is the bacteria domain, and that's where the eubacteria fits in. Remember, the eubacteria is just the normal everyday bacteria. These are prokaryotic and they're single-celled. Now, up here, you'll see it says peptidoglycan, which is a fun word to say, is in the cell walls. That's how they know that it's a eubacteria. They can just test for this peptidoglycan. They're never going to ask you that on any test, but it's there just to know. And then the last domain is called the archaea, and that is where we get the archaeobacteria. And they don't have peptidoglycan in the cell walls, and these are our extreme environmental organisms. Okay. So the 3 domains are eukarya, bacteria, and archaea, and then the 6 different kingdoms fit into those 3. So here's an example of some classification for a leopard. And if we look at the kingdom, let me see here. We look at the kingdom, we see that the kingdom is the Animalia. And you'll see they'll put letters on the ends of these because it's Latin, but that's fine. It's the animal kingdom. And there's lots of different organisms in the animal kingdom. If you think of your favorite animal, you know, if I asked every single person in this class, it would be very easy to come up with a new animal for the kingdom. Okay, so this is the biggest section. So the animal kingdom is the biggest thing. As we move down, you're going to notice that they get smaller. Okay, the phylum is called the Chordata, the chordates. That means they have a backbone. Then we move down to the class. These are mammals. That means that they have a placenta when they have their young and they nurse with milk. Then we move down to the order Carnivora. That means they're a carnivore. Then we get down to the family Felidae, which is actually your house cat would still fall into this family. So if you think about it, the panther and your house cat are related all the way down to here. Then we get to the genus, it's called Panthera, and then the species is Panthera, and Pardus is our species. So we end up with the leopard. A lot of times they'll have common names. You know, the leopard is the common name part of it. And by having a classification name, all the scientists out there, or naturalists or biologists or whatever, they're all going to know what exactly you're talking about. Oops. Okay, so classification of Homo sapiens, same kind of thing. We talked about the domain here, okay? Then we are in this animal kingdom, the phylum, the chordates. We're still in chordates. You jump down, they can have subphylums and things like that. Class is mammal, so we're still in the same grouping as the panther from before, or the leopard, I'm sorry. Our order is primate, the family is Homidae, our genus is Homo, and our species is Sapiens. So that's where we get Homo sapiens from. All right, so let's talk about some of the kingdoms. The animal and plant kingdom are pretty simplistic as far as the things that we know. So we're going to go and cover that in separate chapters. But I'm just going to talk real quick about fungi. Fungi are all members are heterotrophic. That's a vocab word that you need to know. Heterotrophic means that they cannot make their own food. They have to eat other organisms. Okay, so if you're a heterotroph, you have to eat other organisms. We're heterotrophic. We cannot make our own food. Really the only organisms that can make their own food are some mostly plants, and some protists can make their own food. They are multicellular. If you're a fungus, you're multicellular, means you're more than one cell. And they secrete digestive enzymes into their food source. So basically, if you're a fungi, you have to be pretty much standing on your food. And then you release digestive enzymes into it, and it breaks it down, and then you kind of absorb it into your body. And the most common mushroom that we know out there are the most common fungi are the mushrooms. And you can have different kinds of fungus. This is a fungus growing on a leaf over here. Here's a mushroom, and this is a fairy circle. I don't know if sometimes you can see these things out in the woods or in a yard or whatever. And basically what it is that there are a bunch of mushrooms that are growing in a circle, and there's down under the dirt, there's actually a mushroom that's growing, and it spreads out and causes it to grow out in circles like this. All right, the next kingdom is called the Protista, or the Protist kingdom. I call this the junk drawer kingdom. Basically, we all have junk drawers at home, and if you think about your junk drawer, what's in it? It's all the stuff where you don't know where to put anything else. Okay, it's random stuff that it doesn't fit in the other drawers in your kitchen. You got a silverware drawer, you've got pots and pans cupboards and things like that, but then we have other things that don't quite fit, so we put it in the junk drawer. We kind of lump them all together. Well, the protists were like that. They didn't fit into the plant and the animal group because they kind of overlapped with these. Most of the protists are going to be unicellular. They're eukaryotic, and some of them can be multicellular, like kelp. Okay, very diverse group. Diatoms are these little tiny organisms that are going to be usually in water and algae. Some of them are autotrophic, some of them are heterotrophic. And remember, heterotrophic means that you cannot make your own food. So the opposite of that is autotroph. The autotroph can make their own food. They use photosynthesis, and they can make their own food. Here's this kelp, and these are some diatoms, and these are some more diatoms. If we looked at pond water under a microscope, we may see some of these kind of different things. Okay, dichotomous key. We've talked about these in lab. We did a lot more intricate dichotomous key in lab, but we can use a dichotomous key when we have to identify an organism and we don't know what it is. And they have this tool. And it's a chart that identifies organisms based on characteristics. It's only the physical characteristics. You cannot use behaviors or habitat or things like that. It has to be something that you can observe. For example, pretend that you don't know what any of these things are. And let's look at this one right here. Okay. You don't know what it is. I know probably do, but we're going to pretend you don't. So we want to figure this out. And this is the dichotomous key to figure out what this thing is. So what we do is a dichotomous key is going to have numbers, and then it has two choices, and you have to pick one of the two choices from what you can observe. So let's look at this one, and you always start at number 1. Okay, so is that a long tubular object, or is it a short non-tubular object? Well, it's not tubular, so we're going to go with B. And then what you do is you just go over here and you follow the directions. And it says go to number 4. So we jump down to number 4, and it says, is it black and silver? And we look at it, and it's black and it's silver. And we go over here, and guess what? It's this organism called a pencil sharpener. And, we know that, okay? You can do this with every single one of these. And when we do it in lab, we practice on it a lot more than that. So this is the classification unit notes, and I hope that you learned a lot.